up to record. So welcome to this very special conversation. I know you guys really want to hear this because this is a topic that is not talked about an awful lot. And when Robin said she wanted to come and talk about this, I thought this is so important. We're going to talk about how all of your relationships in your life can affect your bottom line in your business. And just a little note, I remember years ago, my son and I, he was young and he was he had some challenging behaviors, and we had a very challenging time, and we would have a disagreement, and he had lots of issues with anger, and I would walk away from that situation and he would be fine, and I'd come back to my desk and go, well, how the F am I supposed to function now and just move forward? And so I'm so excited to hear what Robin has to say about this, because I saw how much my relationships were impacting my business directly. So welcome, Robin. I'm thrilled to have you. Let me just tell you a little bit more about Robin. She is a master holistic healer, creator of a life of choice coaching, including the Enneagram coaching, dream coaching. She's a teacher, a numerologist, a motivational map practitioner, speaker, and best-selling author. Holy smokes. That's a lot of great skills she's got there. She combines her knowledge of psychology, conflict resolution, and other techniques with metaphysics and energy, resulting in a very unique approach. She assists both adults and children shift vibration and perspective, creating a life of freedom and choice. Her 3 C's for life are clarity, comprehension, and creation. When we create a healthy relationship with ourselves, we attract the healthy relationships we want in our world. Isn't that the truth? She's experienced breast cancer and hepatitis C and many challenges in her life, and has been able to heal and move forward. Her mission is to assist others in their healing journeys in a safe and practical and gentle way. Welcome, Robin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What an amazing history that is. There's so much there that I would like to ask you about. We don't unfortunately have enough time to ask you about everything, but tell me a little bit about how you got into this work that you do, and how you discovered all these different tools that you use. Your journey a little bit. Give me a bit of that.
Sure. Well, I was one of those kids that always had a questioning, curious mind. And I grew up in a very poor family, and there was abuse, and my dad was alcoholic. My mom was suicidal, so it wasn't very nurturing or kind in any way. And I really wanted to figure out why people were the way they were. And so that kind of drew me into the psychology and the counseling. And, we need to learn for ourselves what we need. And so it really was healing myself and helping others as I went through that process. And then I went through the marriage that was reflective of my past history. So it wasn't a healthy relationship. And it took me a lot of time to get out of it. And, once I did, I felt really free, but I felt very restricted. I didn't have the self-esteem at the time that I needed to know that I could do better. That I didn't need to be treated that way, because there was a lot of the anger cycle that I was used to in my family home. And so once I left that, then I started to do the healing work, and then having the breast cancer was the big catalyst to really shift my life into becoming a healer. And the words just came out of my mouth. I was actually destined to become a union president. And someone asked me, are you going to run? Because we all want to support you. And I just said, no, I'm going to be a healer. And I had no idea where that came from. I just was looking around. Who said that?
What a journey. Wow. But it's interesting. Everything that you just mentioned is all about relationships. Right? So, you're coming at this firsthand, having experienced, obviously, relationships that weren't nurturing and weren't loving and kind towards you, and you saw the impact. And a lot of people don't make that connection, though, right? Like you saw how those relationships impacted behaviors that you had. But I don't know that everybody makes those connections. What do you think?
It's true, because we have to have that awareness. And
Mm,
sometimes we're so stuck in it. Like I look back at my mom, she was very much in the victim mode. And so everything was done to her. And that's
mm-hmm,
why I really talk about choice. Like that's my number one thing. If people can get that, that
mm-hmm,
you have choice in every minute and every day.
mm-hmm.
So otherwise, and that victim stuff is so prevalent in our society. And I still notice bits come up every once in a while for me, right? It's layers as we move.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's why we usually need to work with someone else to help us to see outside of that blind spots that we have, because when we're in it, it's hard to see out of it.
Yes, isn't that's so true? You know, you're doing something and somebody says, "Hey, wait, did you realize you're doing that?" And you can, "Oh, I didn't realize that's what I was doing." Sometimes that other perspective can be so helpful and so powerful if you're open to it. And I just want to say, I see that there are people joining us in the Facebook group. So I welcome you, and I'm happy and grateful that you're here with us. If you have questions for Robin as we go through, I've got questions I'm going to ask her as we talk about her specialty of helping you heal your relationships to affect your bottom line, then please type them in the group, and I will make sure that I ask her those questions on your behalf so she can answer your question for you. So we know a little bit about how you got into this work now, and I think a lot of times people who do work like you have gone through medical crises like you have, that kind of have them be reflective and looking at the choices that they've made in their lives. So what does it mean to be a master holistic healer? I heard you said had that in your biography that I read. So what
Mhm.
does that mean?
Because we can't just take one piece of our life, and this is what people do in relationships as well, they tend to compartmentalize parts of their life.
Hmm.
And what I've realized is, yes, the beginning part was the psychology, counseling, conflict resolution, all of that. So that was one piece. And then the next step when I dealt with the cancer was to really go have the courage to go into the feelings and let those out. So we have the physical, the
Mm.
mental, the emotional, and the last piece is the spiritual. And then the cancer also opened me up to that because I had shut down from my connection. And without that extra piece where we're really connected to the universal principles of love, then we can't bring that in for ourselves. So that's why we need to deal with all four parts. And
Mm.
that's when we can really be whole and holistic in the true sense of what holistic is.
Mm. So you address all four of those areas in your work with people then?
Yes,
And does it, I mean, it sounds like it goes back to loving yourself first.
it is. And I also teach a metaphysical class, and the whole focus is self first. And that's what I found after dealing with the cancer. I was doing for everyone else,
Mm.
working full time, doing the union work, doing the strata
Mhm.
council, everything else. And studies show that our unhealthy relationships and all of the stress actually cause our physicality and our immune system to be lowered. So
Mhm.
that's why we can actually get sick when we don't have healthy relationships.
Interesting. And of course, I didn't think of this before this conversation, but um, relationship with ourself first. It's kind of like a mirror. How we feel about ourselves would then be mirrored by the relationships that we have with other people and the achievements that we're creating. Would that be true?
Absolutely, because what happens on the inside is reflected on the outside. And so often we're taught in our society that we need to fix things out here.
Mhm. Mhm.
The reverse is true. We start with the inside and then it's reflected back to us. So in those places where we're finding all the angry people or the victim people or whatever it is that we're attracting in our life, we need to look inside and see what part, have the courage to go inside to see, where am I playing that out? Where can I release some of those patterns that, weren't my fault? And I think that's the other piece, is to really feel, let go of the shame or blame or whatever it is that can
Mm.
come up,
Mhm.
because it wasn't our emotion to begin with. We took this on when we were little,
Mhm.
and just our parents didn't know any better. They didn't know about boundaries. So we didn't learn that.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
something we now have to learn to have that healthy life.
Yeah, and you said something really important about having the courage to look inward. And it's easier to look outside of us and blame other people in our lives, other situations, blame our parents. It's really easy, and it doesn't have us taking responsibility for much. But true healing comes from having that courage and looking inward and knowing that you can handle anything you discover, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's where people, and that's how I felt when I first started to go in, because I basically spent 6 months on my sofa,
Mm,
quiet, and just looking at my life. And the thing is, we feel like we're never going to get through to the other side when we
right.
first start to go in. So the truth is, it's a cliche that we don't get more than we can handle, but it's
Hmm.
true. We go in and out. It's not this linear process. So it's easier when we can have someone help us to reframe that we can just step in and step out. So that's all I can handle for now. And that's okay. You don't have to do
Mm-hmm.
it all at once. It's a process.
I love that because I think that's where people kind of get stuck sometimes is they start dealing with the internal stuff that's going on and then they feel like they're never going to get through it. There's a incredible lack of belief that they will, that there is something on the other side of it, that what we're seeing right now is all we're ever going to have.
Mhm.
Um, and having that support to have somebody, walk you through it and hold your hand in those dark times is so important.
And we didn't learn to be kind to ourselves. We kind of do the self beating up. So it's like, why am I not through this? And why
Mm,
can't I go deep and just get through it? And it's just not the case. So the more that we can have that kindness for ourselves, it's like, wow, I did do that. I did look at that. I did feel it. And,
mm,
and that's the key, right? Is allowing the feelings to come up, because when we squash them down, what happens is they sabotage us in other ways.
mhm,
But when we
mhm.
actually let them come up, and when we can actually sit in it for a little bit, it actually moves through us. And that's how we can actually release it.
Mm,
But the more we stuff it, the more it's going to stay stuck.
mhm. But we also have to be careful that we don't sit in it for too long? Because I mean, what about when we get to that self-pity, to that depression, to that,
Mhm.
victim place? That's isn't that where that comes from?
Part of it, and I think part of it is understanding the emotion is different than that kind of overall way of looking at the world. So there's kind of two pieces to it. One is that worldview where we see things through that lens of victim or whatever it is. And there's the other piece of, oh, I'm just feeling sad right now and allowing that to pass. Uh,
Mm,
and yes, definitely
mm,
with depression, that is really important that we don't stay stuck in that and get help, because we know what a crisis it is right now with addiction and suicide and everything else. So
yeah,
yeah, that's kind of a category all on its own.
for sure, for sure. So important that we heal our relationship with ourself first. We fix whatever, our problem is, look inside. What kind of things do you see happening, or experiences do you see people having in their lives when their relationships with themselves and with others aren't working really well? How do those relationships affect, say, our business, our bottom line? How does that happen?
A lot of it is because we're not aware of what's going on. We just think that that's the way it is. So we will stay stuck in the procrastination.
Mm,
That's a big one. And the self-sabotage. And it could be as simple as, oh, I don't feel like doing that today. That's self-care because I'm going to go and watch a movie instead. When
hmm.
it's really not true self-care, right? It's like, if self-care, it's like we still have to move towards what we want. We have
Hmm.
to set those goals and do all of those things. Or it could spill over to another relationship. One of the big ones for a lot of people is anger. We're never taught to how to deal with anger.
Yeah.
And so it comes out in sideways ways. So
Hmm.
the people who yell in traffic, the road rage, it's usually something, these other instances of anger that have built up over time and they need a way to release. And it's a safe way. to do that, which is not true, but in our mind,
Mm-hmm.
that's what our ego would have us think, that that is a safer way to do it, because we don't want to go home and, kick the dog and
Right.
do that kind of thing.
Right.
So there's this place of knowing what the feelings are and letting them release, because otherwise, when we're unaware, we may actually, we're frustrated with someone that we're dealing with, or we're not being honest about how we're feeling, so the relationship doesn't go to a deeper level that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm having a problem with someone else and that's spilling over to my worldview of other people. So I'm going to keep my distance, and that other person's going to feel it. So it's like the elephant in the room. We're not going to talk about it, but there's still this wall between us, and I'm not sure what it is. So we're not moving forward in what we want.
Mm-hmm. So how do I know if my relationships in one area of my life are impacting or affecting another area? I mean, I think it goes back to being aware and, really conscious of what's going on. But is there something more to it than that?
It can be feedback that you're getting too, so what's happening in your business? What's happening in your personal life? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling a bit isolated? Are you noticing that you're withdrawing? Are you having more angry conversations and you notice it's like, oh, I thought they were my friend, and then we've had this issue, and then you notice that same kind of interaction with someone through your work or some kind of other place, or maybe when you go out to do your networking, either you don't want to go because you've had a bad situation with someone there, or that you just don't feel that you have the energy to do it. And often that's the case. If we don't have the energy to do something, it's like, well, what's going on? If there's no physical reason, then it's either probably mentally or emotional, or sometimes even spiritual.
Mm-hmm. So we're looking for patterns that repeat itself from our experience, maybe in our personal relationships that ripple over into our business world. Would that be?
That's one of the main ones, is actually seeing how those affect. And just those kind of weird things, like you go to something and you blurt out something, and it kind of, people are looking at you and you're even thinking to yourself, why did I say that? And it creates a situation that, again, creates some type of barrier or something like that. So these are the unconscious things that could be in another relationship that are coming out that way because you haven't addressed that issue.
So what do we do if we say, okay, well, when I get home, I have a lot of conflict. Maybe I'm fighting with my kids, I'm fighting with my spouse, I'm dissatisfied, I'm just sitting and doing nothing all evening. And then I notice that when I go to work, I'm not getting along with people as well. People are irritating me. I'm feeling annoyed. I'm not accomplishing. I got passed over for the promotion. What do we do when we start seeing that kind of a pattern starting to happen? What's kind of the first thing we could do to kind of help us move forward and change that pattern?
Number one is the awareness. And then the next step is actually noticing the feeling. And, when I've worked with people with anger, people don't realize that we actually have control over how we respond. So there's a place where we can actually feel that start to come up, and we can actually stop it or do it in a more gentler, kinder way. So instead of having the big expression and maybe yelling or doing something, we notice, oh, this is the precursor before I go to that step. So it's like working our way back. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling the feeling.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do I need to do for myself in this moment?
That requires a lot of awareness.
Yeah.
Right? To be aware and to recognize that and to know what that's a sign of. And a lot of people kind of just stumble through their day not very aware, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's why I like to talk about mindset a lot too, right? It's like starting with that place of choice. It's like reminding ourselves all the time, I do have choice. And so the more that we can come from that place of, okay, I noticed that this is what happened. And even taking that time after an interaction where it didn't go the way we wanted to, and not being tough on ourselves. It's kind of like the correct parenting, right? Where we're firm but kind. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like having that firmness for ourselves to say, this is important to me. And so I want to improve my relationships. Let me look at what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? What was my part in it? Taking that responsibility and seeing, was there a boundary that was crossed? This is one of the big things I find with people. We all need to learn more about boundaries. It's not a skill that we learned in our family.
Mm-hmm.
And anger is one of the big pieces
Mm-hmm.
that let us know that a boundary is being crossed.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the Brené Brown definition of boundary, which is what's okay with me and what's not okay with me. It's
Mm-hmm.
nice and simple. And so those clues of anger, or frustration, irritation, whatever it is, it's like, okay, is that a boundary? What am I saying or not saying that is not moving forward for me into what I want? So simply saying sometimes, I need to take some time out to think about this more. You know, this society puts so much pressure on us.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's our sales techniques, and that's everything that we do. Make this decision now. And we have everything in our face all the time. And actually just taking some time to step out and take some time for ourselves and just do
Mm-hmm.
breathing and realizing we are okay, that we can make this decision from a different place.
So your work helps people sort of increase their awareness, their recognition of the choices that they have, and empowers them to make changes to their relationships and their work environment. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. And it also helps you to build capacity.
Mm.
So we have, you know, for certain people, we have this range of understanding of our feelings, for example. And then over time, we can increase that capacity, or we can increase that capacity for how deep of a conversation I can have, for example. So relationships are always on a continuum, like many things. So
Mm-hmm.
we have, you know, the acquaintance to our romantic partnerships. And so there's different levels of intimacy along that. And the skills are the same. It's just building on those and learning them so that we can go deeper and deeper with what we do want,
Mm-hmm.
and be honest about what we do want. Because I find people, they have needs and wants, and when it comes to certain relationships, they kind of let go of that, and then they end up with the places of frustration and resentment, and then that relationship ends. So the more that we can say what we need and own that, and not so much apologize for it, but just say, this is what I need from a place of loving myself, and what do you need, and can we find compromise there without compromising our values and who we are. And that's really when we can have the better relationships, when we're more solid in who we are and know what we
Mm-hmm.
need and want and have our boundaries, then we allow that other person to too, and we can both have a
Mm-hmm.
responsibility and come together in a more mature way.
Mm-hmm. And you know, you had me thinking about. Of course, I've got two kids, and um, talking about boundaries. You know, it starts right at the beginning, because I remember when my daughter was little and would have play dates with other people and would go to their house, and you know, 2, 3-year-olds, there was this expectation that this child would share everything with my daughter. And there's this real culture in our world about, you know, teaching kids things that end up having them not have many boundaries at the end of the day. That's well intentioned. Learn how to share is so important. Then kids would come to our house, and the parents would be a little horrified, because I would say to my daughter beforehand, things you don't want to share, get put away in a closet, because you don't have to share everything. That kid's mom doesn't get to go up into my bedroom and go through my drawers. I don't need to share everything. So but I really saw that in our world, we teach kids really early on not to have boundaries, not to express anger, to shove anger down. No wonder we have a society of adults that don't know how to handle those emotions or understand those connections. So you gave me quite an awareness there in that. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. You have a lot of tools that you use to help your clients.
Mhm.
And so the one that stood out for me, Enneagram. Can you tell us what that is and how that works? Because I'm curious. That name just kind of is an interesting word.
Mhm. Yeah, and people are like, how do you pronounce that again? It's a very interesting system. It's like 4,000 years old, and originally came from the spiritual community, and you learned your type, and that's it. And then in the 60s, we brought in the psychological. So it's a tool for both transformation psychologically and spiritually. We have 9 types with us having bits of each, but we have one main starting one. And so this helps us to see what are the ego defense mechanisms that come in for us at an early age and how we view the world. So this helps us to see what we pay attention to in our world.
Hmm.
So for example, me as a 6, we have the fear of the fear. We get to have all of it. So, no surprise, I worked for a safety organization for 34 years. And the thing is, when we move through the kind of lower end to the higher end of the type and we let go of some of those ego defense mechanisms, we come to the gifting. And so I love to see the big picture of things, and I can see what's the holes are in things. So, for example, I did project management and I was really good at it because I could see that and what was missing. And so it's a way to really look at what are the parts of ourselves that we're not allowing. So one of the things we say is we welcome all parts of self. So for example, if jealousy comes up for me, for example, what's that telling me? If I choose to ignore it, then it's going to come up in those weird and wonderful ways and sabotage me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But if I actually look at it and look at what was the positive intention when that first came in, and what is this telling me? So it's simply telling me that I desire something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it takes the charge off of it. And when that's integrated and I can see, oh, that's there because of this, then it helps me move towards what I want in the world rather than stopping me and I'm feeling stuck.
Hmm. Hmm. That's
And
really empowering.
it's very empowering. And so, for example, I had one client, she wanted to build better relationships, especially networking, being an entrepreneur. And there was a fear that came up through her type. So we worked with that. And then she feels much more comfortable doing that.
Hmm.
I have another person I worked with, and the 2 is the helper or giver. So they're constantly, how can I help you? Because that's how they want to show their love and build connection, and are looking for it in return, but not consciously or clearly. And so their attention is always going to the outside. And so
Hmm.
we work through some of the feelings of it's okay to have boundaries and actually learn to know what I want, because often they don't because they've been giving for so long. To actually learn to say
Hmm.
what they need
Mm-hmm.
was very transformational. And I just got such a wonderful response and testimonial saying how it changed all parts of his life. So it's just really rewarding to see how people, when they see what's going on and we can kind of shift some of those things that we just do automatically and let ourselves be who we are. And really, it's about our core essence and allowing that core of who we are and those places where we don't judge ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
really, we do judge ourselves in so many ways.
In so many ways we aren't even aware of. At times, I've become aware of that for sure. It's true. It's that we live in a very judgy society, and I don't think we even understand how much that can hurt us. So, I love that. I love how empowering that sounds, and how I love how you've shared how using the Enneagram system has helped you with clients to understand their behaviors and their choices and to empower them to make different choices. That's fabulous. And that's exactly what we want, is to, make choices that bring us more happiness and peace and joy in our lives, right?
Yeah, what's the point otherwise, right? To just go through our day and maybe for some people, but the thing is when we have everything we need, I don't know if people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's a pyramid, and on the bottom are our basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
As we move up, we go towards self-actualization. And that's what's happened in our society. The motivational map process I do also talks about that, and that's part of it. So it's like we used to have the carrot and stick approach to motivation. And as our society has changed, we've moved more towards self-actualization and wanting to live our purpose. It's just part of how we've developed as people. And so when we actually know what those motivators are, whether it's wanting to be the spirit or the expert or whatever it is, then we can move towards, again, what we want and who we are and what's important to us.
Fabulous. I love that. So you, how can people connect with you? I mean, if there's questions, Robin's in the group, so you guys can post questions. You can reach out to Robin. But I know you also have a free gift to share with everybody, which I've already claimed because I was excited about it. I'll put the link in the group, but why don't you tell people how they can connect with you and what this free gift is that you have for them today?
My website is alifeofchoice.ca, since we're here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And the gift is, one of the books I was in was The One Thing Every Mom Needs to Know. So I created a bookmark, and it's the 5 steps to deal with conflict in partnership. So, I mean, it's geared towards the mom, but it's fine for anyone. It's still the same 5 steps will work in whatever part of your life that you want. So it's just a little bookmark infographic, and you can print it out and put it on your fridge or in your purse or whatever you want. And yeah, it just gives you an easy 5 steps to look at and see where am I in those steps? What can I do to help shift this conflict that I'm having?
I love that, because you can take it with you so that when you get into the conflict, you can just say, oh, excuse me, just a minute, let me look and figure out where you're at. And then Robin can give you techniques and things you can do in those moments to help you make different choices in your relationships. And I mean, we just see it every day. Relationships impact everything.
Yeah. So and whenever you start to feel that come up, just take a deep breath. The more we connect to our body, and that's why I really talk about the holistic. So in the Enneagram, we talk about 3 centers: body, heart, and mind. And so for me, I'm a head type, so I constantly need to make sure that I'm reconnecting with my physicality and my heart center. And we have such amazing wisdom in our body that we don't tend to even think about. And so the more we can breathe into that, that's going to help us be more present. And that's where we want to be when we're dealing with conflict, because if we're thinking about the past or the future, we're not going to resolve anything in the present.
I love that. Robin, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for being here. I'm grateful for all this information. I definitely have claimed your gift, the bookmark. I encourage you all to do that as well, because we find ourselves in situations where we stumbled into them, it seems, almost unconsciously, but then it takes being conscious to change the pattern that we're in, and this bookmark's definitely going to help with that. Any final parting words you'd like to leave with us?
Just really think, what do I need in this moment? And don't think of it as selfish. Think of it as self first.
I love it. Thanks so much for being here, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who joined us in the group. I know a bunch of people were watching, but nobody was saying anything. They were just taking everything in.
Okay, well, I'll go back in the group and see if there's any questions.
For sure. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Robin. Everyone have a great day.
Okay.
Bye.